Hi, and welcome back to another video. Today was going to be either a mental health video or an Ask Faye video, but I feel as though my mental health is slowly deteriorating. I'm having body dysmorphia, I just not feeling very great, not feeling very motivated, and it could be to do with the fact that I'm on my period currently, so I feel like it would be a bad idea to delve into the worst parts of my past and or into my mental health. So I'm gonna let that recuperate for a little bit, and I want to talk about Islamic schools. Now, quite a few ex-Muslims that I have met up with have been to Islamic schools. I am one of them. I went to an Islamic school in Hendon that has been completely rebranded, but when I went to it, it was called Aisha Community Education, or Aisha's Community Education, with no apostrophe, naturally. And I just want to talk about that today and not delve too much into everything that's going on here. I might discuss it a little bit at the end of the video. But as a little disclaimer, if you're not interested in this video at all, feel free to just leave. Dislike below, unsubscribe below. Currently, that's where my mind's at, honestly. I just want to unsubscribe from my own YouTube channel. But let's distract ourselves from that for a second, because that's really depressing for no reason. Let's talk about Islamic schools. What was my experience? Now, as I had waddled out of primary school as a 10, 11-year-old child, I initially thought my father was going to send me to a girls' school. It was one of the worst schools in my area, but it was a girls' school, so he thought it was appropriate. And to be fair, my naive little mind was really, really excited to go to this girls' school, because in the first year, in year 7, or the first year of secondary school at that girls' school, the school's name was John Kelly. It's now been rebranded as something else. In the first year at that time, they used to do horse riding. So I was really, really excited, because I, as a normal 10-year-old, loved horses. I used to collect little ponies before my family became super religious and decided to throw them all out. But I used to collect My Little Ponies, and I was super excited to have, horse riding part of my life. But plans changed abruptly as my father promptly told me, "You're going to an Islamic school." Now, my family had just started becoming like super Islamic, and my father was part of the Tabligh Jamaat, and I, didn't want to go against my father's wishes. I loved my father. If people asked me at that time who my favorite parent was, I would have said my dad. So I didn't want to go against him, and I wanted to, make him happy. So I went along with this idea of going to this Islamic school. Now, the first time I went to the school was just my father, showing me the route to the school so that I'll be able to go there every day on my own. So he showed me the route, and again, I was a 10-year-old and I was super naive, so I didn't know what the school was going to look like, but I assumed that it was going to look like a school. Lo and behold, I, take my route there. I'm not going to explain my route because I don't want anybody knocking on my dad's door, nor do I want anybody harassing the people who now live in the house that my school was. We come to just like a block of flats, and not like a big block of flats, just like a 3-level house. And I asked my father promptly, "Where is the school?" And he said, "This is the school." And I was like, "No, that's a house." And he was like, "It looks like a house, but it's a school." And it was right next to a funeral center. And it was funded by Hendon Mosque, because the school was in Hendon. And the principal of the school had originally set it up because he couldn't find a school suitable for his daughter. So he had set up an entire school. I say entire, but the first year, of that school was only 4 students before they branched out into 12 students for a year group. Now, I don't know about other countries, but in this country, a year group consists of sometimes 400 or 500 kids. One of our year groups was 12 to 14 students. Oh my God. Just like, it was the worst time because like I was already nervous leaving one school to go to another school. You know what I'm saying? And then I show up at this school and there's only like 11 possible friends that I could make when I already knew I was a weirdo. Anyways, so that was the first time I was introduced to the school. Now, again, I was a naive little girl and I didn't want to disappoint my dad. So I went along with this idea. And honestly, I didn't really have a choice in the matter. I was 10, 11 years old. So all I knew about the school was it was an Islamic school, and they gave us like a list of things to buy for the school, which I had decided to pack all of those things into my bag on the first day and promptly tear my bag in half because it was just too many things. They had given us a book list, a stationery list of the specific kind of like folders we had to have, and the specific calculators and staplers and all like very, very specific things that we had to have in year 7. Year 7 is like the most irrelevant year in secondary school, so I don't know why you would need all those things, but as like most year 7s, I had brought, you know, everything with me, and I'm still like that. I still carry my world around with me. You know, it's probably why my back aches constantly, endlessly, forever. It's just me. I'm just Atlas, carrying around everything all the time. But yeah, they had given us this long list, and on top of that, I remember at that time the fee was like 1,500 for a year. You had to pay to go to a house to school. But then as the school, like as I progressed in years, I think the fee raised to about like 3,000-4,000 a year. So my father was paying for me to go here. Paying for what is, you know, another question altogether, but he was paying for me to go to the school. On the first day of the school, I knew that the other thing that I knew about the school is that you had to wear, the uniform was a black hijab with a blue like underpiece, like a bandana, so that you could see like a little bit of blue here. I'm not going to bother wearing a hijab, like you're just going to have to envision this. It's like a little bit of blue like here, and then a black hijab, and a black abaya, or like a long black dress, full sleeves, the whole nine. And on top of that, because I wanted to be whimsical and cool and make friends, I had worn like a bright white blazer, and it had like these patterns on it. I can't remember where I got this blazer. I feel like it came from a relative, but it had like these like pockets that were, it was like a really country themed jacket. It was bright white. Like I had washed it, I had cleaned it. I was so ready to be the whimsical kid in school, and I mean, I don't regret it, but that became my personality for the next 7 years that I was there. But anyways, so I go to the school. I meet some of my former friends from my primary school, and they're like, that's your school uniform? And I was like, yeah, we can kind of wear whatever we want to this school. And they were like, oh my God, that's so cool. Why are you wearing that? And I was like, because it's an Islamic school. And they were like, it's just the normal conversation, right? Now, I go into this school, there's like 12, 13 other girls in my class. And then there's like the upper year, which were the year that were tormented the year before, the year 8s. And that was the school. It was just year 7 and year 8. I came in the second year of that school existing. And the people who were in the year before us had like these black scarves that were like embroidered with the logo of the school, which was just ACE, or I think they changed it to ACS later, but it was embroidered with that logo. And we were introduced to the subjects. And, you know, they had all the normal ones. They had maths, English, science. Whether or not they taught those properly was a whole different matter, but they had those subjects. They had maths, English, science, they had IT, they had like a couple of other subjects. They had like history, geography, you know, stuff you normally have in school. But in the design and technology lessons, they only had two options. Now in other schools you have options like woodwork and metalwork and, you know, like product design and really cool stuff. The only two design and technology options we had was cooking and textiles. And we didn't have arts at that time because, you know, face is haram. So super haram to draw. So we didn't have art at that time, but we had a textiles teacher, and I really liked her because I was allowed to express my creativity in that class because I was allowed to draw in that class, and she was the only teacher that wouldn't give me shit for drawing humans. Like every other teacher would give me shit for that. And we had an Islamic studies class, which was a quote-unquote religion class, but it was an Islamic studies class. We only really learned about Islam. And the teacher there, I remember her very well up until the end of my secondary school education. We had the same Islamic studies teacher, and I would drive her crazy because I was the one who would ask all the really difficult questions, and I was the one who was constantly told to shut up, and I was the one who would constantly argue with her because I knew she was wrong. It's not a discussion. I knew she was wrong. Like, whether or not she was talking about things that were wrong or, like, things in Islam that were wrong. Like, y'all already know. Like, you guys already know that I was pointing out things that were wrong. But yeah, we had a bit of a rocky relationship is what I was saying. But I was still the best student in her class. And the reason for that was that I think I got some of the highest marks in our class. And also, I always knew the right answers for everything in her class. Because guess what? I was the most religious student at that school. Maybe not the most religious, but I was part of, like, the religious group. There was only, like, a couple of girls who were super religious, and I was one of them. But also, of the religious group, I was the most curious, which probably knocked me down a peg from being religious. Because I'm not supposed to ask questions. You're just meant to accept things. Sorry, I'm like detracting, but that was more or less my first day. Like so in this house, we had we had the ground floor and we had the first floor. On the ground floor, we had two rooms. We had one room, which was just like a classroom. It was more like a living room. And then we had an IT room in the other room on the ground floor. We had one classroom, one IT room, and it had like a set of 14 computers or something. And they were like Apple. Before they had perfected Apple, they had like the Apple desktops. I don't know what they're called. Like the hard drives. If somebody knows what those are called, please let me know. But this was before like anybody knew how Apple worked. Like we couldn't get Microsoft Word or Excel on them to work properly. And then on the first floor, we had a bathroom upstairs, and we had one classroom with a whiteboard in it that everyone was super excited about because it was a school with a whiteboard. And we had a kitchen, where, you know, we would have our cooking lessons. I do this because we only had like 2 cooking lessons before the teacher just dropped out. And that was our school. We had a total of maybe like 5 teachers who would teach us all the subjects. And I did a total of 12 GCSEs. So there were 5 teachers teaching 12 subjects. So that was more or less my first day at school, was just me looking at this and thinking how horrible everything was. And to the school's credit, I believe we could go out at lunchtimes because we were on we weren't on a main road, but we were on a road where they had like shops and stuff, and we could buy sweets from the shop next door. And we used to buy like those long sticks of sherbet. We used to get those all the time. And those flying saucers, which I used to love sherbet, as you can probably tell. And we had like this tiny little backyard. There was no grass, it was concrete floor. All we could do is literally just like breathe some fresh air. That was it. There was no room to do anything. And sometimes we would see rats running around outside, which was amazing, you know. I think for the first few weeks we had like hot meals that we could pay for to get, but you know, my family was already paying through the nose for my education. So we couldn't really afford to do that. So I used to bring my lunch all the time, and sometimes I wouldn't even bring lunch because we didn't have food. And a lot of people would be like, why don't you ever bring lunch? And I'd be like, because I don't want to. Because I'm not going to tell everybody that I'm destitute and not eating at home. But anyways, like getting away from that, like I said, not going to discuss my mental health problems here. Even though this is probably a manifestation of my mental health problems. Later on down the line, things did not improve. I think when I, like 2 or 3 years later, when I was in year 9, we moved buildings to an actual building. It used to be Barnet College. And we moved that school, like that little house, to Barnet, like the old Barnet College, because we had raised funds on a channel called Islam Channel, where they had done like an ad. And it was like one of the most embarrassing things ever. Also, I started wearing niqab in year 7. I was like 11 years old, covering my face. Yeah, sure, whatever. No one decided to talk me out of it. Nobody decided to give me any advice. I made like 0 friends. I had like 1 person that I had anything in common with, but you know, whatever. Sorry, I'm like rambling now. But anyways, in year 9, they had decided to build, move us to a different location. It was like down the road. And we had expanded from 14 students to 26 students. And before we had even gotten this new building, we had gotten all the students because the school just wants money, literally. So we were fitting 26 students into these tiny little rooms. And I think by that point we had gotten the second floor, which had like 2 other rooms in it. Someone was living up there before, by the way. I don't know what happened to them, but we had gotten the top floor, and there were like 26 people crammed into these tiny little rooms before we moved like 2 months later. But we got this new building and we were like fully fledged. We had all our years done up, you know, from year 7 to 11. A lot of people had dropped out by this point. A lot of people had left. A lot of people had gotten expelled. I'm not going to name any students because I feel like that would be disrespectful, even though I had some of the worst fucking memories ever in that school. And then I think they also opened like a primary school or something, but like we never saw the kids we did see the kids, but I never experienced any of the education there. So I don't know what that was like. I just knew that our education was terrible. We had like 4 different English teachers because the English level in our school was terrible. We used to have to come into school on Saturdays because the school deemed our level of English that bad. However, they had like really poor teachers, like really, really bad teachers in like IT and in some of the science classes, like for chemistry and physics. And we had really poor teachers in like maths. They kept flip-flopping with the teachers. I liked like 2 of the teachers and they just disappeared off the face of the earth. And there were some teachers that wouldn't know how to speak English very clearly or properly, so they would either be speaking in a very, very thick accent that nobody could understand, or they just would not know how to, like, it was just broken English. It wasn't full English. Many of the teachers were unqualified, and because it was an independent school, that was okay. Like, for example, our Islamic studies teacher was not a qualified teacher. Our DT teacher, even though she was great, like I loved her, she was not a qualified teacher. Many of the teachers were not qualified teachers. The only lessons that I can fully say were done properly were the history lessons in year 11 and year 10, possibly, if that was the same teacher, because I really felt like I learnt how to like do history. And I was pretty good with humanities, so like geography, history, religion, English. So those weren't areas of concern for me. For me, my areas of concern were IT, because I fucking sucked at it. And alongside sucking at it, they lost my coursework. So I got knocked down like several grades for that. Because in IT, at that time, the coursework was 60% of your grade. So I would have only got a maximum of 40% on my exam. In the last year, in year 11, we had like no maths teacher until like 2 or 3 weeks before the exam, before our GCSEs. No maths teacher. In year 11, we changed the board for English, the syllabus for English, so we had to do completely different texts, because in year 10 we were doing Edexcel, and then we moved to AQA, which are 2 different examining boards, so we completely flipped over what we were studying in English. So we had to fit a 2-year course, AQA, a 2-year course into 1 year, which was extremely stressful, and which was why we needed to come on the weekends to do our work. For DT Textiles, which I had decided to continue taking because I enjoyed it, and it was the only art outlet that I had to let my creativity out, they had not given us the proper themes at the beginning of the year. So later, like a couple of weeks before the exam, we had to change all our mood boards and all our designs, and like add little things to the things we had already made, to make them fit the themes that were meant to be for that year. The coursework was not recorded properly. Again, we didn't have a qualified teacher, so she wasn't qualified teaching. What else? We had like 3 different science teachers. All of them said different things about different things. We had no sex education. Just none at all. We were just told that gays are bad and don't have sex before marriage. That was it. We didn't really learn about other religions. We like touched on them briefly. We mainly did like Christianity, and we looked at some Christian paintings, and that was about it. What else? What else was terrible? Oh, the demographic in an Islamic school. Like, obviously, if you're going to a girls' school, it's only going to be girls. If you go to a boys' school, it's only going to be boys. But the people who are sent to Islamic schools are either from very religious families and are religious. Like, for me, I came from a religious family, and I was religious myself. Or the alternative is the complete opposite. They come from non-religious families, but the families want them to be religious, and they think that they're hopeless, so they've sent their daughters here to be corrected. So you have a very strange mix of students there. You have a very, very clear divide of students, of just rebels and extremely like sheltered individuals. And it caused for, in some circumstances, amazing conversation, but in other circumstances, just really boisterous arguments for no reason. And also, it was a complete girls' school, and I never got along with girls. Not when I was younger. I grew up around guys. I grew up around 4 uncles. My best friend was my cousin, who was a boy. And I just, I didn't really have that many friends in primary school because I moved constantly. I moved from one school to another, so I lost all my friends from my previous school, and then in my new school, I didn't really get to make new friends because I had like 2 other years, and nobody really liked me because I was a weirdo, and because I didn't wear any modern day like English clothes. I would only wear Bengali clothes. So when I came to this new school, and everyone was, first of all, there was only 12 of us, 12 to 14 of us. And some of our backgrounds were kind of like weird. I didn't really know who to make friends with. I made one friend who I kind of shared like this punk rocky kind of thing with, because she was like into Avril Lavigne and into Nickelback, I think. And we used to talk a lot. We used to hang out a lot. But then she kind of grew out of me, and I just became the weirdo. So, I mean, that was my fate. And I mean, look at me now. I'm a mess. But what happened after that, after leaving year 11, is I went to the same sixth form because my dad didn't want me to go to a normal college, and also I was covering my face. And at that point, colleges weren't really going to accept people who were covering their face to go to college. So I'd gone to sixth form, and sixth form was even fucking worse. How was it worse, you ask? In sixth form, most students pick 4 subjects the first year and then 3 subjects the next year for A-levels. because that's just a lot of like the way that it is in sixth form. So they'll pick 4 subjects, and then the one that they like the least, or the one that they need the least, they'll drop off, and then they'll do 3 subjects the next year to complete 3 A levels and 1 AS level. They did not offer the A levels that I wanted to do. I wanted to do religion, English, history, and possibly like politics or sociology. They didn't offer politics or sociology, and they didn't offer history. So I had 2 options. I had English literature and I had religious studies. Of course, they were going to have religious studies. But I didn't want to do a science, and I didn't want to do maths or psychology at the time, because I just didn't want to do them. My life had been planned out for me, and I thought, if I'm going to be in school for 2 more years, I might as well enjoy myself. So I might as well do subjects that I actually like. I'm sorry, I'm a nerd. I could have just bunked every day. Nobody would have noticed, because I'm a brilliant liar sometimes. But, I mean, I like studying. I genuinely enjoy studying, and I wanted to study the things that I wanted to study. So I complained to the school, and I was like, I insist that there's a history lesson at least, because I want to study history. And they were like, well, there aren't any other students who want to do history, which I know is a blatant lie, because if they had put history there, I'm sure there would have been history students. But they were like, what you can do is we can get you to talk to your GCSE teacher, and then you can teach history yourself. And you know what? I was so strong-headed about it, because I really didn't want to do a science, and I really didn't want to do maths, and I really didn't want to do psychology, because those were the only other things that they offered, except for physics, which I would have gone for. I would have gone for physics, but they didn't offer that. They only offered biology, chemistry, psychology, and maths, and I didn't want to do any of those. So I taught myself the history syllabus for that year, and I don't regret it. I thought it was one of the most interesting things that I ever, achieved. I ended up getting an A on the exam, which was, the only thing I needed to do. There was no coursework. I picked one intentionally that wouldn't have any coursework because I didn't have a teacher to mark it. So yeah, it was one of the most interesting experiments I did with myself, was that I got an A in my history, AS, and I studied Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, but I had to teach myself. And because I didn't have 4 subjects to study, I had so many free periods. I had to come in every day. I had to come in at 9 o'clock every day, because I had a lesson every day. But because I didn't have 4 subjects to study in college, I had like 2 lessons a day. So 2 hours that I had to go to actual lesson. And the rest of the time I was just sitting in other people's lessons, or I was on the computer on DeviantArt, because that was what I was into back in the day. Don't send your kids to Islamic school. Don't do it. You might be paying for the atmosphere or the ethos, but the ethos doesn't exist, because it's all rebels and really Islamic girls. And guess who's more popular? Okay, you're not paying for an education, and you're certainly not paying for an ethos, because it's just crazy hormonal girls. Even if they're religious, they're still doing crazy shit. I'm sorry. Don't send your girls, don't send your boys, don't send anyone to an Islamic school. Send them to a school where they can learn about other people, and not just constantly be in feuds about the Jews are evil and homosexuals are bad. And, conspiracy theories about the Taliban. Please, I am imploring you, for any of you out there who are considering sending your kid to an Islamic school that has not been, regulated at all in terms of their education, you are paying for their failure. You are just paying through the nose for their failure and nothing else. I achieved my grades on my own merit, and maybe you can say, oh, that's the benefit of you being an independent learner. Not all of us are independent learners. Not all of us can, open a book and just write out everything in the book and then have that stay in our heads. I'm one of those people that if you give me a book to study and then have me write an exam tomorrow, I can do it. I can do it and probably get 70%. But not everyone's like that, okay? Don't send your fucking kids to Islamic school. It's a terrible idea. Take it from me. I went to an Islamic school, and if you don't believe me, if you don't fucking believe me, just go back and watch that Islam channel ad. Like, look at those kids and tell me that those kids look happy there. None of us were happy. All of us were constantly, perpetually stressed. And I had a tiger mom. I had a mom who expected me to get A's. And, you know, anytime I would come home with a B, she would just be so disappointed. Like, imagine that pressure on a kid and then also them not getting, like, a proper education. Like, not even, like, a decent education. Forget, like, grammar school bullshit. Like, forget that. Just, like, a decent, like, A to B education. Not like C, D, E, F, G, Z education. Just, like, A to... Like, it didn't even meet foundation criteria. It was a terrible school. It was a terrible school. 5 years I spent in Arabic class. 5 years. Learned like a couple of phrases and maybe just like reading it and understanding it more or less. In 5 years, I was a language student. I was a literature student and a language student in English. I was great in English because I knew the language. If I had, you know, if that kind of nurturing had gone into Arabic, I'd be fluent. But guess what? Guess what? Islamic school fucking sucks, is what. So don't send your kids there. This is my video for today. I'm sorry. I just needed to... I didn't really need to get that out of my system. I just thought I would put that out there because it deserves to be out there. Because I can't believe people are still sending their fucking kids to Islamic school expecting them to get good grades. Because it's like 9 times out of 10, it's not going to happen unless your child is genuinely like an independent, like bookworm nerd, like I was. Like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to work out. Most of the exams, like almost like 80% of my class failed in most of the exams, except for maybe like English because we had so much of it. So please, 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 from the bottom of my heart, don't send your kids there. Just don't do it. Bad idea. Thank you for being here and listening to me rant about Islamic schools for over 30 minutes. It was one of the worst things that I could have been put through, but also it made me really strong in my independence, I think. I think it really gave me a knack for independence and, you know, this drive to know that I can do whatever I want to do. But nobody should be put through that. There are way better ways of discovering that than being put through 7 years of just bullshit. Just constant, repetitive bullshit. Where you just learn in a bubble and you learn nothing else. So, I'm gonna go now. It's pretty late. I should probably get some sleep. Enjoy your evening, day, whatever. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.